Could we see the Montreal Canadiens make a huge splash at the NHL draft and acquire the second overall pick, so they have the option of picking the top 2 prospects in this draft? Plus, could we see some trades involving the Edmonton Oilers this summer to create some cap space? The Seattle Kraken might be a huge player in free agency. Plus, we have some updates on the Bruins and Flyers coaching situations. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. First up, I just want to do a quick preview here for Game 6 in the Eastern Conference Final coming up tonight between the Lightning and the Rangers. Obviously, by the time this video makes it to YouTube, the game may already be underway. It will be cutting it close, so we're not sure here. But obviously, it's a big night. The Rangers trying to survive and push this to Game 7. The Lightning trying to punch their ticket to their 3rd consecutive Stanley Cup Final, so they have a shot at a three-peat. Obviously, is not something we've seen since the early 80 New York Islanders teams. Obviously, it's been a long, long time since we've had either a team win 3 cups in a row, let alone make 3 consecutive final appearances. So it's a big accomplishment regardless of what happens. Apparently, there is some rumors concerning the Rangers lineup and some talk that Kaapo Kakko might be a healthy scratch this evening. I would imagine we're likely going to see a couple of extra players in warm-ups and see where things go. Braden Point has again been ruled out, but it looks as though he is getting closer. And the belief is that if this series does get pushed to 7 games, that there's a really good chance Point will be in the lineup. And if he doesn't play in Game 7, or if it's not necessary, but the Lightning do advance to the final, there's an even better chance that he is available to them in that series. It looks like he's getting pretty darn close to making a return. So obviously we'll see how things go tonight. The Lightning do have this uncanny ability, though, to close out series. Once they get an opportunity to close it out, they generally don't miss that opportunity. Andrei Vasilevskiy has come up huge, pitching numerous shutouts and closeout games as well. So the Rangers are going to have to find a way to score at 5-on-5, take advantage of the power play if they do continue to get opportunities, and they're going to have to hope that Igor outperforms Vasi. It's just that simple. It might sound easy as an easy plan, but it's a lot more difficult to actually execute. But they're capable of it. It's just a matter of getting it done and seeing if they can find that will, because to me, the Rangers are a heavily skilled team. They have all the right tools to push this to Game 7, maybe even win and go on to play for the Cup. But to me, the Lightning just have that extra drive more than any other team that I've seen in recent memory here, just letting it all on the line and getting it done what it takes to get themselves to victory. So we'll see what happens. It should be a very interesting game here this evening. Now, a couple of updates on some coaching carousels. Obviously, we know that there's numerous NHL teams looking for coaches that have recently parted ways with their old head coach. A couple updates regarding Philly and Boston. First, with the Philadelphia Flyers, it appears as though we're down to 2 names. The 2 finalists appear to be Barry Trotz and John Tortorella, according to Frank Saravalli. And we've also seen some Philadelphia media indicate that it looks as though the job is Barry Trotz's if he wants it, but it's more than likely going to end up being John Tortorella, just to the fact that it doesn't appear as Barry Trotz is really in any hurry to make a decision, and it's not like the Flyers are his only option. He has numerous opportunities on the table. So with all that said, it's difficult to say. I mean, I'm not going to say it's 100% not going to be Trotz, but it looks like if for some reason Barry Trotz either takes too long or eventually does inform the Flyers here in the short term that he's not ready to commit, not interested, or whatever, that Tortorella will be the next head coach in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. They did have a lot of interviews. They've talked to a lot of candidates, including some current assistant coaches around the NHL like Mike Vellucci, Jim Montgomery, former head coaches and Rick Tocchet, as well as Jeff Blashill and David Quinn, all been interviewed. It's believed, too, that after Bruce Cassidy was let go in Boston and became available, that they at the very least reached out. It wasn't clear based on the reports how formal things got. It's not really, for sure that he actually had an interview, but it appears as though they at least had a conversation. But it doesn't sound like it went too far, regardless of how formal things may or may not have been. So Tortorella appears to be the front runner, I guess, just because of the time frame that Barry Trotz has been taking, and like numerous teams are ready to hire Trotz, and he doesn't appear to be ready to accept anybody's offer. So that's why I'm leaning towards Tortorella. But if Trotz decides he wants to coach the Flyers, it looks like it might be his job here unless he decides otherwise. In Boston, of course, they just recently surprisingly let go of Bruce Cassidy. It appears as though the three main names being linked to the Bruins, of course, they've also reached out to Barry Trotz amongst numerous teams. I don't think there's hardly any teams that have an opening right now that have not at least spoken to Trotz. So like I said, he has his pick of the litter. He can decide basically where he wants to go and write his own ticket here, but he's taking his good old time. So it's really hard to say where he's going to end up, or if he's even going to maybe even make a decision not to coach this year. You have to wonder. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure financially he's in good shape, and I'm sure that, at the same time as well, that it might not be terrible to have a little time off. So we'll have to see, and I'm sure if he did take time off, there's going to be opportunities throughout the season as coaches let go into next summer. So we'll see. It's hard to say, but he's, again, another name in Boston. The other two names being linked there is former Bruin Jay Leach, of course, current assistant coach with the Seattle Kraken, and former Rangers bench boss David Quinn. He appears to be in the mix here for a few jobs. So Quinn appears to be getting close to getting back into the game here after having some time away after he was let go by the Rangers. So that's the latest on that. And speaking of the Seattle Kraken, of course, they could be a big player in free agency here. Now, Pierre LeBrun made a fairly substantial statement here on what the Kraken might do this offseason. And now, it does make sense that they will be big players in free agency because being a new team, they still have way more cap space than the majority of the league. So they have more flexibility. They don't have a lot of long-term contracts, and they don't have a lot of bad deals on the books. Like, they're not in the same predicament that a lot of these other teams have been dealing with here during the flat cap era of the past couple of years. So they have more flexibility, and because of that, they can make a big splash. Now, it's also known that because their first season, as much as it might not have been anywhere near the standard that Vegas set, I don't think that they were expecting that anyways, but I do think it's fair to say they were expecting a better result and outcome than what they actually achieved. And it looks like their plan is to definitely use the free agent market to get better and stronger for next year, and it sounds like adding some much-needed scoring punch up front certainly appears to be a big part of that plan. So LeBrun mentions that the Seattle Kraken could be a surprise team, or a wildcard team, if you will, when it comes to pending UFA forward Johnny Gaudreau's services. Now, of course, at this point, he's not officially on the market. The Calgary Flames still have a fair bit of time to come to terms on a new contract. But you have to think with the history of the agent of Johnny Gaudreau, Louis Gross, and what we've heard for a long time about Gaudreau, jumping out of Calgary the first opportunity he has, which I'm not really sure there's a lot of truth to, but the rumors have been rampant for years that he was going to bolt the second he had an opportunity. But obviously, I guess time will tell how much truth there is to that. And even if he does leave, I still wouldn't be able to say with any kind of certainty or believe the fact that he's been wanting it all along. Maybe something better comes along that he can't pass up. Time will tell. But the Flames have lots of time here. But like we had been mentioned by, heard reports from Flames management, like this is a paramount situation. They want to get deals done with Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk as soon as possible. The sooner they get these done and on the books, the better, so they can move on with the rest of their offseason and rounding up the rest of this roster, because they do have other decisions to make, and it's hard to make those when they don't know how much money is going to be tied up to their top core players. And it's vital for them to keep them in the fold here. So, but we know that teams like the New Jersey Devils, to a degree, the Philadelphia Flyers and the New York Islanders are probably the three main teams I'd watch. If Gaudreau does leave by free agency, or once he hits free agency, I should say, I would think that those would probably be the three teams that would likely be the most aggressive. Now, we know New Jersey, they have some cap space, they have some flexibility. We know Tom Fitzgerald is expected to want to add some scoring help to go with his dynamic young forwards that he has, and Hughes, Heischer, Bratt, etc. Like, they could use a good veteran like Gaudreau. Of course, he's from that area. The Flyers, even though theoretically you look at the Flyers' cap situation and roster, it would be challenging for them. But I do see a scenario where they could open up some cap space by making some other aggressive moves. And we do know that the Flyers themselves, Chuck Fletcher had made comments saying that this offseason could be similar to back a few years ago when they did a quick retool. And, they were pretty aggressive then, and I think they could do it again. So I wouldn't rule them out of this just because it doesn't look like they have the most flexibility today. And the Islanders certainly need a scoring winger to play with Matthew Barzal, and that appears to be high up on the list of Lou Lamoriello. Again, another team that would probably have to make subsequent moves to make some space. But again, I wouldn't rule it past them. They have some options, and I think that Lou probably has had enough conversations that he will have things ready to go should an opportunity like that present itself. So I think they're the main ones to watch, to be honest. But a team like Seattle, with all that flexibility, if they throw enough money at a player like Gaudreau, I guess we'll soon find out what's important to them when it comes to winning or not. Because, does Gaudreau want to chase a Stanley Cup as quickly as possible? Is he going to get paid as much as possible? What's more important here? Because obviously the Kraken are nowhere near contending. So we'll see. You can make an argument that the Devils and the Flyers are in the same boat. So is going home more important? Like, we don't know, right? And that's the big thing when you're trying to hear all these different rumors and you really don't know what's most important to the player because they're not going to come out and say those things anyway. So we'll see. But the Kraken could be a surprise team here to deal with. The Oilers are another team to watch. A couple of names to keep an eye on here for the Edmonton Oilers has been heavily discussed by local and national media in the past couple of days include Jesse Puljujarvi and Tyson Barrie, both likely coming in cost-cutting moves, and it would not be shocking to see that they could be traded either separately or in a package to maybe get themselves a goaltender. That's going to be an area that they need. I mean, when it comes to Tyson Barrie, the rationale behind him is he's basically become a luxury they can't afford. They need to free up some space to address other areas of the team. They have Evan Bouchard making substantially less money, who can give you the same sort of role in production back there, and he's improved enough during his early days of his career that he's ready to take on more responsibility and play the role that Barry's been getting, get more power play one time, etc. And to me, it just makes sense that they move Barry's $4+ million to do other things with that money. And Jesse Puljujarvi and Kyler Yamamoto, they're both RFAs. They probably can't afford both. And it looks right now that the organization would probably prefer to keep Yamamoto. At least that appears to be the way they're leaning. But at the same time, you could probably make an argument that with the production being better for Yamamoto, it might have better trade value. And could Puljujarvi's production improve by staying at Edmonton and maybe getting a different combination on the lineup or whatever? Hard to say, right? So they're going to have to make a decision, a tough one. But by not re-signing one of those players, as well as moving Barrie, that could be enough money. Because if they're both going to get, I don't know what kind of money Puljujarvi and Yamamoto are looking at, but I'm sure it's going to be at least $3 million. Maybe a little more. Combine that with Barrie, now you're looking at between $7.5-8 million. That's a lot of money. So that's certainly money that could be well spent on a goaltender and maybe another player on top of that. So it makes a lot of sense. And there was some talk online. I've seen Islanders writer James Nichols mention, because somebody else had mentioned it, and he sent it out on Twitter, talking about a potential move of Barrie to the Islanders for Semyon Varlamov as a possible deal that would make sense. And it does make sense. Problem is we don't know that Varlamov would want to go to Edmonton because he does have a modified no trade. He can block 10 teams. So there is speculation that, a lot of players are hesitant to go to Canadian markets or at least colder climate markets, etc. So we don't know, right? So hard to say if Varlamov would accept that or not, but it makes sense that he may not be crazy about it. So with that in mind, it may not work out. Plus, as much as the Islanders really need a defenseman with Barry's skill set, they would probably prefer somebody to play the left side, not the right side. So it's not a perfect trade, but it does make sense. And I guess we'll see. And it's nothing, like I said, there's no rumor suggesting they've been having conversations. It was just a suggestion made online that does make some sense, but it's not quite just perfect either. Now on to the other topic I want to talk about here today, and that's Montreal. We know they're hosting the draft, and we know that there's a good chance that they're going to want to make a big splash here. They're going through a pretty substantial rebuild, so certainly we have reason to believe that there's bound to be some trades either in and around the draft that will be involving them. That's probably not going to come as a big surprise to many people watching this video, because it's really a big time. You see a lot of trade activity, and they're expected to be very busy. They're picking first overall as well, so that alone is going to make a big splash by getting who they feel is the best player available in the draft. But there was comments made by analyst Maxime Lapierre talking about how this team should be super aggressive, make a big splash at the draft, and do whatever they could to obtain a number 2 pick from the New Jersey Devils. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, but at the same time, we do know, based on New Jersey Devils reports and from comments from the GM himself, Tom Fitzgerald, he's willing to trade that number 2 pick. Now, keep in mind, just because he's willing to, doesn't mean he's going to give it away for whatever you want to offer him. You're going to have to knock his socks off with an incredible offer that the Devils just can't refuse. It's just that simple. That's a high-value pick. you rarely see top 5 picks traded. And when you do, they tend to not go your way. Like the last one we've seen at that level for a number 2 pick was way back when we saw the Islanders and Senators hook up with the trade that sent the number 2 pick to the Senators, along with Zdeno Chara for Alexei Yashin. So Yashin had his issues. He was productive at times. More of a headache than anything to deal with. And that number 2 pick to Ottawa was Jason Spezza, and like I said, Zdeno Chara, who wasn't at the level he was when he was traded that he became later. But still, pretty sweet deal for Ottawa to get 2 star players for one disgruntled star player that became a headache that they was able to pass on. Mike Milbury really messed that one up for sure. So you got to be careful. So I don't think the Devils are going to do this for just about anything. There's some key players out there that apparently they've been researching that they're willing to do. But Lapierre's suggestion is good in a sense. If they could get the top 2 players in this draft, like Shane Wright and Slafkovsky, for example, like the big scoring winger that's 6'4", well over 200 pounds. He's certainly ready. He looks like Slafkovsky appears to be the most mature and ready for the NHL, more than anybody, even more than Wright. Now, Wright plays center. There's a lot of reasons why he's ranked first. But as far as who's ready to make the jump and have the earliest impact, I think Slafkovsky checks that box. So if they could do it, sure, it would be awesome. And it would really kickstart the rebuild, which is what Lapierre is saying. So now that his comments were then put into an article here by Montreal Hockey Now, and I'll link that in a pinned comment. As much as his idea is great, it's heavily flawed because there's just no way Montreal is going to be able to give New Jersey what they're going to want. And what New Jersey's going to want to make this trade, if they're going to consider it, is they're going to want a highly impactful player that can join their roster immediately, that can be young enough, ideally have term, or somebody who they can either sign or extend right now to a long-term deal that can be a big part of the team's future for like the next 6 to 8 years. And I just don't see a player on Montreal that they would be willing to part with that would get that done. Because they're going to want to continue to keep Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, probably Romanov, guys like that. And that would be what New Jersey would want. And if they're not going to include those guys, they're not going to stand a chance. Now, what he suggested was that the Montreal also has a late first-round pick, number 26 overall. They have multiple mid-round picks, so a first and a second, so pick 26, pick 33, and then he's at a couple of roster players or younger players. So I don't know who, like what are you talking about? Like Josh Anderson, Christian Dvorak, Brendan Gallagher, Jeff Petrie. I just don't see New Jersey taking a couple of those players with those picks for number 2 overall. It's a lot of assets coming to you, sure, but they're not the right ones and they're not the impactful ones that will have a positive, lasting effect on the franchise for many, many years to come. Now, I do see a possibility of Montreal, if they can acquire other first-round picks for any of those players that they'd like to move, whether it be Petrie, or I guess they would probably consider Hoffman, Anderson, Dvorak. There's a lot of those players they would consider trading. And if they can get a first-rounder back, I think they would probably do those deals. But I think you're looking at maybe picks that would be more like mid-round picks or later in the first round, not number 2 or number 5, number 4, like anything that high. So to me, if Montreal is going to make a splash, they're going to have to make probably smaller moves, picking up additional picks, or unless something else crazy goes down, which you just never know. It's hard to predict, but as much as his idea is great, I don't see it happening. Will New Jersey trade the pick? It's possible. I would be willing to put a bet down, though, that the odds of it happening are pretty slim, just because I don't know that anybody's going to come along and offer them a great enough package or deal to make it work. There were some people that thought that the Canucks will offer up JT Miller, and that maybe they will. I don't know. Because there's a lot of talk that he could be moved. Will they go for that pick, though? I don't know if that's enough. I mean, as much as Miller's a great player, but he's also older, right? So I really don't know how New Jersey would feel about that, So it's really, really, really difficult to say. But it's going to take a really, like a younger top player, ideally. I mean, Miller's not really in that category anymore. Really, really good player, mind you, very productive player. I just don't know if he's in that age range that they're going to want. So as much as it's a great concept, I don't see it happening. I do see them making splashes in other ways and likely taking Shane Wright first overall. But let me know your thoughts. Do the Habs have any chance at all to trade with New Jersey for that number 2 pick, knowing that it's, available in that they have some options should they put a package together, make it try. I just don't think they have what it takes, but let me know what you think in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.